If you know me, I really am into what was Twitter, which is now X. The reason for that is that for, I don't know, the better part of maybe 15 years, from right out of college to my mid-30s, really up until Trump. This will make sense in a moment. I was a Drudge Report guy. So the internet's exploding. Like, you could go to 30 different websites to get the news, or you could go to Drudge Report. And Matt Drudge had this one simple page, and like, he didn't editorialize anything. He would break news occasionally, but he would just provide links to stories. And like, he became kind of like your news feed. And so you wanted to know what was going on each day, you'd go to the Drudge Report, and it kind of gave you a flyby of what was happening. And things that piqued your interest, you could dig into deeper. If you were ever a Rush baby, if you enjoyed Rush Limbaugh, his show, if you ever accessed the Ditto Cam, you would see that Rush on his big Apple monitor always had Drudge Report, always up. Drudge turned liberal with Trump. I don't know exactly what all happened with that. That's a whole nother topic. I stopped trusting, because I began to realize there is some editorializing going on in just what he posts, why he posts it. And I don't know if he sold it or not, or just had a change of philosophy, but like, I bailed from it. And that's when I kind of really discovered Twitter, because what Twitter allows you to do, or X, is it allows you to create basically kind of your own Drudge Report. And so you can control your feed, where you're able to follow whatever news organizations or sources. You control your content, basically. And there's two tabs. There's the following, so that's what you absolutely control. And then there's a suggested for you column, which is always fun, exposes you to some different things. But like my X is news, and like the Atlanta Braves, the Hawks, Georgia Bulldogs. Like, I can control that. So I like it has substituted most of the news consumption. I get most of it from X. And you can say, oh, you're getting it from social media. Well, I control what I'm getting it from news sources. So I love posting and commenting and engaging on X on a wide array of topics.
Oh, it is.
So we become, yeah, we have almost the same algorithm.
Yeah, but like, following you, like, half the time I'll just watch what you're commenting on, and it is great.
And it'll be from anything. Like, I will rant on the Atlanta Braves. I had a post I did a little while ago about this Bristol Motor Speedway game, and how much I hated every part of it. And like, someone like even jumped on there that I have no idea who it was. It was like, you're a pastor. Like, why are you bagging on something that's supposed to be family fun? And I'm like, blocked. I have blocked almost 30,000 accounts, because you can do that. Like, I'm not here to engage in you and talk to you. Like, anyway, I love X, and I love posting things. I love discovering different things. And so we thought what would be a good segment, be a little different, is that we were going to do a segment. We're calling it, now you got to follow me, X, Y of Z's posts. And before I get to one, we're going to roll a little intro video. The logo helps the explanation.
Every tweet, every thread, he's taking a hint. Tax on the case in a digital race. The X, Y, and Z's post, he's setting the pace.
I can watch it fade out. Yeah. I mean, I could see the video. We don't, in the studio, just so you know, like, you'll see a lot of podcasts and everybody's wearing headphones, and they're wearing headphones so they can hear the production end of it. Or like, if the producer's behind a wall of some kind, wants to communicate, so that you can hear, but that's not actually entering the show. So that
your mics are clean.
Your mics are clean. Because this is conversational and we're in the same room, and Creighton produces, but he's also on the show. We don't do the headphone thing. We just talk and whatnot. Now, when we do like a video like that, we leave the mics live, and Creighton's very adamant that we're quiet about it.
That was like watching live one of your X things.
It kind of was.
Yes, it was.
All right, so let's get to an
I
X.
don't know what that means.
Let's get to
I'm not on X.
Let's get to an X, Y of Z's posts.
Yes.
So I have a post. Happened this week. In fact, it was on Monday, August 11th. I replied actually to a post from a great account. So you have Babylon Bee. Babylon Bee is great. It's like the Onion for Christians. It really started kind of as a Christian thing where they were satirically making fun of a lot of things within church culture that you would have to be in church culture to find funny. Like worship leader dies after getting caught in the infinite loop of singing oceans. You know, like this is funny things that within church culture. But they got bought out. It's more broad. They get into politics. They dabble with all kinds of different things. But Not the Bee, same company, is not satirical. It's kind of like more of their serious news site. And so you can run across some good things. Now, I saw Not the Bee post something on Monday, but I immediately saw it. I mean, it popped up all over the place. Like I was seeing people retweet different news sources. Like news broke. Now, I saw this on Not the Bee. And they had it was an article link was the post, and it was a link to ABC News exclusive, and the title of the exclusive was Supreme Court formally asked to overturn Obergefell ruling on gay marriage. And again, I saw that and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I need to do a little digging into this before I just jump in. Before I comment, before I editorialize, like, again, and you should do that. Like, you read a headline, you need to dig deeper to really understand what's happening. And in fact, what I discovered prompted me to actually reply. It's been the most viewed tweet I think I've ever had, because again, you're commenting on a common thread. But this is what I posted. So this is Z's post, and I'm gonna on X, and I'll give you the Y in a moment. But I posted, this seems like a misleading headline. SCOTUS will hear enough to consider whether or not they'll actually hear the appeal. And again, the headline was Supreme Court formally asked to overturn Obergefell ruling on gay marriage. That's not true. SCOTUS will hear enough to consider whether or not they'll actually hear the appeal. They could decide to not have the case come before the court at all. Which is a more accurate statement. And so I want to read a little bit of the ABC article and then add some commentary about this, because I do think it's fascinating. I think it's just there's some interesting things afoot, some things that we might even revisit later in the Outlaw Radio episode. So 10 years ago, after the Supreme Court extended marriage rights to same-sex couples nationwide, the article states that this fall, the court will consider for the first time whether to take up a case that explicitly asks them to overturn the decision, which by the way, the opening line of the ABC article discredits the headline that they used. Again, this is clickbait. That's why you got to be careful. They want you to think, hey, they're going to overturn gay marriage. No, that's not what's happening. And we have to be careful with that. So the article continues, Kim Davis, and I remember when all this took place. I remember her, very homely looking lady. Kim Davis, the former Kentucky county clerk who was jailed for 6 days in 2015 after refusing to issue marriage licenses to a gay couple on religious grounds, is appealing a $100,000 jury verdict for emotional damages plus $260,000 for attorney fees. So if you don't recall, you had all these states that had bans on gay marriage. You had a bunch of states that had legalized gay marriage. So one particular court case got to the Supreme Court, and in one sweeping ruling, they validated all of the state law accepting gay marriage, and they declared all of the state laws banning gay marriage as being unconstitutional. Now, Kentucky's one of those states that had laws saying that it was unconstitutional. Kim Davis was solely in charge of issuing marriage licenses. Well, you had a gay couple come in, want a marriage license, and she refused to issue it under like federalist concepts of like, hey, we're a state, we have our own local law. I don't agree with the Supreme Court. But she also said that this was under religiously, she's a Christian, that she could not in good conscience issue the marriage license. Well, she got arrested. She was in jail for 6 days. It went to a jury trial. She was fined $100,000. And ultimately had $260,000 of attorney fees. And if you've seen a picture of Kim Davis, that bankrupted her. Now, continuing, an assert petition filed last month. And if you don't know what a cert petition is, that's important. A cert petition is a formal written request to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to review and potentially reverse a decision made by the lower court. So that's a cert petition. So in this asking, Davis argues First Amendment protection for free exercise of religion immunizes her from personal liability for the denial of a marriage license. More fundamentally, the claim that the High Court's decision in Oberfell v. Hodge extending marriage rights for same-sex couples under the 14th Amendment due process protections was egregiously wrong. So she's arguing two things: religious infringement, but then she's also challenging like the fundamental legality of the Supreme Court's ruling. The petition marks the first time since 2015 that the court has been formally asked to overturn the landmark marriage decision. Davis is seen as one of the only Americans currently with legal standing to bring a challenge to the precedent. And that's important because in order to challenge something, you have to show personal harm has been done. Like you can't, like there has to be someone behind the case. And she fits the description. Quote, if there's ever been a case of exceptional importance, her attorney wrote, the first individual in the Republic's history who was jailed for following her religious convictions regarding the historic definition of marriage, this should be it. Davis's petition argues the issue of marriage should be treated the same way that the court handled the issue of abortion and the 2022 decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, which is what makes this very interesting. She zeroes in on Clarence Thomas's concurrence in that decision, in which he explicitly calls for revisiting Oberfell. So what that means is that when the court overturned Roe versus Wade, in the concurring opinion written by Clarence Thomas, a very conservative judge, he wrote in that concurrence that the justices should reconsider all of the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Oberfell. So, like, they overturned Roe versus Wade because the conclusion is that they used the 14th Amendment, the due process clause, inappropriately. The court doesn't have the ability to write law. That's what they did. In one sweeping moment, they made abortion legal across the country, but there's no constitutional authority for that. So they overturned Roe. Clarence Thomas is like, under the same predicate, there are a bunch of other cases that we now have to look at related to the 14th Amendment and the due process clause, specifically mentioning gay marriage. Thomas wrote at the time, referring to the landmark decision dealing with fundamental rights to privacy, due process, equal protection rights, this needed to be looked at. The court, and this is what's important, is expected to formally consider Davis's petition this fall during a private conference when the justices discuss internally what cases they're going to add to their docket. So that's all that it is. If the case is accepted, it would likely be scheduled for oral arguments next spring. The case would be decided at the end of June 2026, but the Supreme Court could just as easily decline the case, refuse to hear it, allowing the lower court ruling to stand and avoid like the entire complication. Now, what I think is interesting is, so a lot of this will be dependent upon the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who was billed to us as a conservative, but has been all over the map. In fact, did not vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. I believe he just abstained from voting. But Chief Justice John Roberts, among the current members of the court, he actually dissented in the Oberfell case a decade ago, sharply criticizing the ruling that at the time it was, quote, an act of will, not a legal judgment, with, quote, no basis in the Constitution. So the Chief Justice, who kind of positions himself as a swing vote, back with Oberfell, had problems with its constitutionality. That's why he voted against it. He also warned at the time that it could create serious questions about religious liberty, which Ken Davis's case is very much about. And her petition, she actually cited John Roberts, and she's hoping, so what it takes for a cert petition to actually get 2 oral arguments before the courts, you need 4 justices, 4 of the 9, to agree that it needs to come before the court. So if Clarence Thomas is there, if Roberts is there, you just need 2 more. And it seems very likely under that idea, and I think with some of the reading the tea leaves, that it could be heard. But again, if you saw, hey, they're going to overturn same-sex marriage, that's not what's going on. The court approved the first step, and that's that they would hear enough to then make a decision internally whether or not they would actually put the case on the docket. So again, I hope that clears up an issue. I think it's an important issue. I think Christians were largely silenced on that particular debate, shamed into shutting up. I think a lot of things have changed now, and I think we're beginning to see that we've been played in a lot of ways, and that we should be vocal, that we should stand for biblical truth, and we should stand on the simple principle that the state has no right to define something that's reserved to God. God defined marriage. Historically, it's an independent man's law. God set the precedent. And I think as a result, what we've seen, because we've ceded God's authority to man, is that not only have we ended up with like this same-sex marriage deal, but then it's quickly then moved into the transgender rights. Like, it didn't stop there. It's gotten toxic. We now have like this grotesque practices of same-sex couples hiring women to produce babies for them, surrogacy. It's like it opened up a whole can of worms, and then also opened up the infringement on religious freedoms, persecution of Christians. I hope this gets overturned. I hope we're vocal about it. I hope they pick up the case, and I think that this is a good opportunity for that. But we'll see. So anyway, that's the first XY of Z's posts. How was it? How was that? Good?
It's good.
I cannot imagine them overturning, because I remember I was in high school, I think, when it got set up, and so my whole adult life, gay marriage has been legal. I don't know what's going to happen. That sounds like it's going to be freaking crazy.
I heard the same thing for 50 years about Roe versus Wade.
You know what? Me too.
I'm on the
same page with Roe, and here we are.
So there's Gateway Pundit, I think, had a pretty lengthy argument going back to so Anthony Scalia was also on the bench when gay marriage was legalized. He wrote a lengthy dissent. It's worth the read. It's very academic. But like the one thing that Anthony Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg had in common is that they both understood that the fundamental problem with Roe versus Wade is that they removed this cultural topic from the will of the people.
I think
and that happened with abortion. They removed it from the will of the people. If the people come together and say, we want this to be legal, that's one thing. But that's not what happened with abortion. In fact, the majority of people said no, and they overrode the will of the people by legalizing something that the Constitution never spoke. They wrote, their verdict made law, and that's not what the judiciary is supposed to do. They're supposed to interpret law, apply law. But the same basic concept of behind Roe versus Wade, Scalia wrote extensively, was the same problem that he had with Oberfell, because it took this topic out of the natural
order of things,
the order of how American society functions. And that's like, okay, we dealt with slavery. Could the Supreme Court overturn slavery? No. That's not how slavery was overturned. And if the court had done it, it would have been a problem. But what happened? The court stayed out of it and allowed America to have a civil war over it. And America reached its own conclusion to the point that like the abolition of slavery had to go through like, there's a constitutional amendment that had to get, what is it, 2/3 ratification of the state. Like there's a process by which we can change cultural norms within our republic. The court overstepped in Roe. That was terrible. The court overturned that on that ground. The same predicate, however you feel about same-sex marriage, doesn't really matter. It's all about how things work legally in America.
And I think that's a failure on the education system in the terms of civics. Like, how does our system of government work?
But people don't know.
People just don't know. Like, the Supreme Court doesn't make laws. They just sit, like, even the Roe versus Wade stuff. It wasn't this is legal or this is illegal. It was this is not proper under the Constitution. And so people don't understand how the executive and the Congress works and the judicial branch. They don't understand how each one of those are separate and they all have different functions.
You do not want to live in a society where 9 robes on a bench determine the morality of your country.
No.
There are a lot of examples of that in other places. We have separation of powers. We have 3 branches for a reason, because they each designed with constitutional rights to protect the abuse of power. It is one of the things that, and again, Trump is just doing, he's following through with the precedent that was established. Clinton dabbled in it. Bush leaned a little further into it, but then Obama went full. Remember, Obama said, "I'll do this with a phone and a pen. Like I will. Like I don't need the legislative branch to push through my agenda. I'll do this with an executive order." Biden did the same thing. And what happens with executive orders? The next executive comes in and can just completely ignore those orders and rewrite them. That's not what we want. People are like, well, Congress stinks and it doesn't function. That's the design. Like, it's not supposed to work or function, meaning that anything that Congress actually can deal with is so overwhelmingly accepted by the people that they all get on board. Like it or not. People had a big problem with healthcare in America. Obama couldn't just institute Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act. They had to push that through Congress. Like it or not, that's what happened. And they were able to push it through Congress. Now, Trump came in and was going to reverse that through Congress, and John McCain torpedoed it. But there are ways that things are supposed to be slow, even like as slow as molasses. But there's an intention behind that. So
Because a lot of the times when you see huge political swings in a country, it ends up poorly.
yes.
Like when you have just huge, somebody comes in and changes everything real fast,
it's
things end up poorly.
yes.